Hello, my name is Greg, and today I wanted to make a video about the new features in Freeform 2025. There are just a bunch of new interesting features, and I wanted to go over a couple of my favorites here and just speak to some of the other ones. Just let everybody know all the different things that came out in this latest version. So the first one is this new we have a couple tools that are kind of similar here. One of them is Surface Lattice and Perforate. So we'll start out with Surface Lattice, which is going to allow you to create a Voronoi pattern on the surface of the object. So before I do that, let's go ahead and make a quick brace here, and then we will use that brace with the Voronoi pattern here. So just the quickest down and dirty brace, I think, would be something along these lines. So if I do that, and then I use the shell cut clay tool, and we'll grab this. All right, what we're going to do is with shell cut clay, which this came out in the past, so I'm going to set and say, let's do a 3mm brace. So what this tool does, this came out a few versions ago, a while ago. And it's going to extrude through a shape. It's going to offset this entire piece that's already here, and then it's going to Boolean those together wherever they overlap, and then subtract the original piece from it. So whenever I say that, people's eyes are like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? But you'll see what I mean. It's essentially called, in my opinion, the brace tool. If you want to make a simple brace, right? This will allow you to, in like a few clicks, create a brace. So that's what this tool is called. So as you can see, it took it a second to run, but wherever that extruded through, this offset it, and then Boolean this shape with the offset, and then Boolean remove the inner anatomy away. So then it essentially creates this brace. I just use that because one, that is a awesome tool. It's in and of itself. But we are going to use that here today just to demonstrate some functionality here. So the first tool that we wanted to talk about was this surface lattice tool here. So what you can do here is when you go in, you can use a selection, or you can use curves, and then you see here that you can use a seed point to select what side that you want to create the pattern on. So you can use a variety of options here. So we'll just start out with selection because that is a kind of a neat concept here, that if I came through and I just painted with a selection on the surface. And then, of course, you see here you have the tools to remove and clear and all that. So if I hold Control, I can remove from a selection. All of that stuff is stuff that's been in here for a while here. But so I create that, and you see here, I'm going to turn off density zones. We'll get to that in a second. But I can say preview, and it's got an edge curve length target here. If I say preview, it will go ahead and calculate the Voronoi pattern within that selection. So if I were to hit apply, the deliverable here is going to be, let's just do it so you can see what we're talking about. So it's going to create an external curve. So I'll just switch over to curves here, select an external curve, and then these internal ones. So the idea is, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you can use the ridge tool, and we'll do that here in a minute, and create a pattern and cut away from the brace. But before we do that, we'll go ahead and get out of this and go back in here and just talk about a couple more of the tools. So you can also come in and create that selection. And then you have the ability to use density zones as well. We'll use curves instead of just selecting. So I'll go ahead and turn my fit on, and we will just draw. All right, so now we'll come back in, and we will select with the boundary. And we'll come in and we will put, how about we put densities at the corners here? Density zones, and we will make them higher there. And we'll see where this goes here, where we do 10 and then hit preview. So you see here, it went ahead and added more density in the corners, and then they're bigger here in the middle, and then you have the control over the zone here. So if I went ahead and bumped up my curve length to 20 and then preview, you'll see that it updates there. And then if I want to, I can get rid of these density zones and just kind of apply this again if I want to, and just apply them again. So I'm going to do the 6, 20, curve length 5, preview to exaggerate it more, where we're going to exponentially up this. So this is a multiplier here, that anything within that zone is going to get multiplied as it gets near to that point. So now you see this is a better example of what's happening. So, and if I hit apply, you'll see there that we have this crazy Voronoi pattern. We have those curves that we created the outer boundary with. We have the density points, it saves those, and then the lattice curves. So this brings up another good point with a new function that we slipped in here in this version, is we have inside of the emboss with curve, we have a new function here where I'm going to select the boundary, and I'm going to say distance 4, click this, create in new piece at 0.2 resolution, and then hit offset. Now when I hit this and I hit create a new piece, I am not just going to offset this piece and it's merged with it. It's actually going to create it as its own new separate piece in the tree. So this is what I mean. If you've used the software in the past, it had no option to create that as a new object in the tree. So now this is a new object that's separate from the arm, that's the offset. I just use that to point out that that's a new feature that I love that's built right in now. So I can now come over and say, you know, I would like to take that piece and remove it from the shell, right? So I can come over and say, I want to take that arm piece and Boolean it away, remove from. So there, we remove that from that piece. Now you can imagine here what I'm looking at doing with the Voronoi. This is a little dense for what I am going to do, but we'll go ahead and try it anyway here. So we'll go ahead and come over to the Ridge tool, and we will select all these guys. Come over to the settings, and we'll make those match. So we'll do 3 because that's what we did for the brace as well. So we'll go ahead and offset it 6 because that's what it ends up being here. So we'll go ahead and hit apply. So I went ahead and finished this out, and you see here, I kind of cranked it to 11 by raising that resolution really high. But you see how I can go ahead and take this now, and then I can say I want to Boolean this with the other shape here. So if I want to go ahead and say Boolean combine into shell cut, and then I will take the finer. So now we'll turn off my density points and all that, and you'll see that we have a pretty crazy looking lattice structure there. So as usual, I crank it to 11, trying to test out the limitations of this. This is really cool. I'm just at a pretty high resolution, right? So I just wanted to see what it's capable of. So now let's look at another piece of functionality called Perforate. So with Perforate right here, you can lay out points upon a surface and poke holes in it. So that's what this tool does. We'll go ahead and create another model just to show the difference here. So we'll go ahead and turn that guy off. So now that I have that brace, just the repeat of the same brace that we talked about before, we have this Perforate tool, which is really neat. Perforate has some similarities in the initial steps here, where you can select an area and perforate that region. But one difference here with Perforate is if I'm doing it on, if I do a selection right and I'm doing it on here, then it's going to select through. So that's where if I'm doing a brace, I might just draw the curves on it, which would, let's go ahead and do that. Or we come over here and we'll just keep it simple here and mess up just like I did there. And I'll go ahead and turn the fitting on. Whenever you have something that's a thin feature, you'll see that it's possible to select through there. Oops. It does help to kind of turn at an angle in ISO so it's not trying to snap to stuff in the background there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple curves. Like that. And we'll do a one around the bottom here. So I'm demonstrating what not to do. You see, because I have the haptic, I can just go around it without having to go around the outside. Now, of course, just for the people that haven't seen Freeform before, you can come in and you can grab the selection tool and manipulate and move the points around right here. So if I just need to move this and tweak it to make it nice and smooth, we can do so. Not a problem. I just wanted to point that out there if you haven't seen that before. But we'll come over to Perforate. And another thing that we didn't point out when we were on the other tool is the fact that you can use multiple boundaries. So if I say I want to use multiple boundaries and then I put the seed point here, and then I can say what I want it to do, whether I want it to do a divot or hollow, or add the amount, and then we'll cover this here in a second, the equal triangulation or UV. So I'm just going to say, let's just go ahead and hit preview. Let's do that. Let's just see what happens. Just roll the dice here. So we went ahead and we selected those two boundaries. We left the diameter the same here, and we did equal triangulation. So it's just basically, I have it set for circle right now, and then here are the rules in the Perforate settings, right? So we have the ability to say in between 6 millimeters from center to center, and then the margin around the boundaries is 3 millimeters. So you see here, we were able to just have it wrap the holes all the way around. And then if I go ahead and hit apply, so there we have the hole pattern that's created. So you see here, we created a 3 millimeter hole pattern between these two boundaries. Now, if this is randomized pattern, you see here that we did equal triangulation. The equal triangulation will allow us to use the underlying mesh. Well, that's what it is using, the underlying mesh, and those triangles to distribute these holes. So like if that isn't what you want, we do have, we'll just hit undo. We do have another option that we'll show you here too, another distribution algorithm. So let's go ahead and select the front and the back. But what we'll also do is let's just get out of this tool and draw another curve. There we go. So now we'll go back over to the Perforate tool. Now the other tool will allow you, so we'll select all those. We will make them, let's just make them 5 millimeters this time. But where it says equal, this UV projection will essentially try to flatten out that polygon shape that is, so like that, before I had this line down the middle, it was a complete cylinder, right? So it would try to figure out and flatten it. So if I give it this seam line, it will take this and unroll it to a square and then distribute based on that. So that's why I'm going to say here we'll do UV projection, not protection. And we'll be able to change the angle of that distribution here once we calculate it. So you'll see here, we'll go ahead and we'll set that. Just need to set the amount is higher than the thickness of the brace. So we're going to do 5mm holes, and we're going to use the UV protection or projection and take it from there. So there you see that we changed the diameter, the distance between, so we could always update this. Let me say, and you'll see another thing that I didn't talk about is you can do rectangular, which is what we have here, or we can do alternate or hexagonal. So we'll just hit preview again. And then the other thing you can do is change the angle right here. And then once we're ready, we'll go ahead and hit apply. So there we poke those holes in there. So there's a lot of functionality here, obviously, that I'm not able to show within a brief demonstration, but you can see how these are major updates. These are huge. These are lots of new tools that affect lots of different markets, lots of updates there. So that's the perforation tool. So that's the perforation tool. Keep in mind that we have triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon, all those other shapes as well. So we have those available. So that is a really neat tool. Now, another factor here that's really interesting, that if you've looked at the release information, you'll notice that they have the ability in the screenshots in the release notes or on the social media posts that you can align the perforations with the surface lattice. So inside of the surface lattice tool, you have the ability to collect the center points here. So if I come back here and just go back to the arm, you see here, if I use these curves and then I select that same area, and I'm just going to say no density, center points, and then hit preview here. So see here, if I go ahead and hit apply, it gives me the center points for those. So if I come over to here, we can select those same center points and utilize those for my perforation settings. So if I hit this select here and then come over to center points, we can utilize those to preview. So you see here, it went ahead when I hit select here and then click on this and say select all, it goes ahead and it places those divots right at the points here. So we can go ahead and just hit apply. Obviously, I don't want to cut holes into this, but just to show you how this interoperates with it, so we can cut holes in and then use the rest of the boundary for other things. So one other tool that this also works with, if I go ahead and turn off those points, is we can come over to the pipe tool. So the pipe tool, you see I can select all of these curves here, and we'll just go ahead and drop that down. And then the same thing goes for this lattice curves here. You can say select all, and then we'll just add these to it. So I should have just done that from the beginning, but that's the way here I did it. So you can see here that we just created a lattice with the pipes, and it aligns the two tools together. So basically just wanting to show how you can have these lattices and repurpose those center points to utilize with the Perforate tool and the surface lattice together. So those two tools are extremely important updates to Freeform, which are very exciting. Absolutely changes the game for us with the orthopedics prosthetics market and lots of other medical applications that we haven't even probably thought of. So some of the other advancements in 2025 that are really interesting is if I scroll all the way to the bottom here to Dynabots and open up the window, we added the ability here in the Dynabots to be able to, here, let me open a Dynabot. So I just open one up, and if I hit this gear here, you have the ability to come over and say published as licensed Dynabot. And you can add properties in here that it has to go to somebody's unique MAC address or version of the software, your name in here, and setting an expiration date for it. So you can encrypt the Dynabot and allow it to have an expiration date, so they're allowed to use it for a certain amount of time. So this is our first foray into giving people the ability to protect all of that work and allow it to not walk out the door if for some reason somebody were able to just take this and go somewhere else. You would have this ability to publish this, and it would only work on either certain machines or for a certain amount of period. So if there's feedback on that, we'd welcome more feedback, but it's really nice to be able to add a piece of functionality there where you can protect your scripts, your Dynabot routines that you spent a lot of time creating. So that's a really neat piece of functionality there. Another thing that's nice is we have this new points group over here where we can create annotated points, hide and show all the points, or create point. So this is a new tool that allows you to create points from intersecting lines here, planes, plane line intersection, curve piece intersection. So if you had a 3D curve going through, you can create points at the intersection there, creating curves at the end of anywhere along the curve. So you see you have a distance or percentage along the curve. And then you see here you have creating multiple points, an array along a curve at distance, percentage, number of copies, and spacing. So these are all great construction methods to be able to create points and utilize them within your design workflows. Really excited to have that now. In the same vein, if I come over to fit to selection, we carried that over into the points over here. So you can best fit points, and you see we have center of sphere, center, centroid point, surface point, best fit. So if you have the ability now to fit these features, mainly the centroid point and center of sphere. So that's a very similar piece of functionality that you're doing to fit to selection. Other neat little enhancements is right below the points. You'll see over here that we have mirror plane. So you can mirror a plane with another plane right across the center there, which is really nice. So we added that over there in the plane section. And then if we scroll down to the mesh section, we now have mirror mesh. So it works very similar to other versions of the mirror throughout the software, but when you have multiple kinds of objects, mirroring a mesh is different than a voxel and things like that. So that's why we have this special mirror mesh command in here as well. A couple other nice little things is inside of the measurements, inside of the ruler, we added the ability to have a persistent measurement now. So you can add that persistent measurement and you can use your annotation points and click to and from those as well. And this measurement will stay up on screen and will update as you move things around. So persistent measurements is nice. So we'll go over to select. So under select clay, we have this new circle select. So I can circle select, and you see here, select through the piece with a circle now. So that is awesome. And then we also added the ability to loop select over here. So we'll just clear that out. So for loop select, you have to have a curve. So if I were to just draw something here, then I come back over to loop select. There we selected. So that's amazing that we can select things with curves and utilize those. Enhancement there. I absolutely love that. And then a little side note to that. I have used that curve to create a selection, and you see here that we can save a selection. So now I have a saved selection on that object here. So that functionality evolved in another release, but that is something that people very rarely utilize. Well, some people definitely don't understand or remember that that is a piece of functionality that we have. Another thing that I'll highlight that was added before, that let's just let everybody know that it exists now, is this ability right here, 2D selection. So any of these box select, circle, you see polygon and lasso, these right here, you'll notice that what I did before is I clicked and I created a selection, or I pulled out a region. Now in order to create a selection, I would have to rotate to the side and then move and then dictate how deep that selection goes through, which 90% of the time everybody wants to select through, right? So that is one of the things that we would do here, is give you the ability to turn on this 2D selection. So as I just window in, drag in, it selects all the way through automatically for you. And that is something that came out before that, it's just a thing that people forget that we even have. And it comes up because we added the circle select now, right? And it works alongside of that here. And then if I did polygon, As soon as I close it, selected, clear, and then of course this one too. Don't sleep on the 2D selection. That is a really nice tool. And of course, we have the ability to do save selections and recall those and utilize those. So those are all just really cool pieces of functionality. Another piece of functionality, this isn't new, but the select mesh with profile. So let me just try to snag one of our sketches here and utilize it. So this guy, click on it. So you see here, I'm using a 2D sketch to create a selection, right? And then of course I can save that selection if I need to, like we were talking about here. So we've had that functionality in the past here, but if I just go ahead and get out of there and come up to meshes, I have to have a mesh turned on. So there's my mesh. You'll notice that we have it over here now. So profile select of a polygon mesh is now moved over here. So it's the same sort of functionality, create a selection based on a profile. So a really nice piece of functionality that we have now based on the tool that we already had over on the other side. And you'll notice all this works the same as well. So perfect. So that is the select with profile. And then of course we added the ability to use the same sort of tools with the square inside of mesh select as well, select mesh area. So those are all in there. A really neat one here, and we'll just come back to the arm and maybe we'll get rid of that curve there. Use these curves right here. We'll turn those back on. And we have the ability with separate piece. So here we have separate piece with curve. So I can come over and click on the two curves and then come over to separate multiple at the same time. So what it's going to do is selected both of those curves and it will now separate those pieces into three different objects. Split them apart based on a surface patch. It basically puts a surface patch through there and uses it to trim. So the enhancement here is we've had separate. We just enhanced the way it works using multiple curves at the same time and splitting them out into multiple pieces, and it works better now with the Dynabot as well. So we made it work more predictably for a scripting type application. Another little interesting thing here is under open or save, we have it throughout. You have a my parts library, so you can actually create a custom parts library and put pieces and parts in here that you want to utilize. So lots of different workflows in the medical world have different pieces of hardware that they use that are common pieces like brackets and screws and all kinds of different things like that. So you can have that all in a library that's centrally located. That you're not navigating from here to there to here to there and back and forth. It's the separate concept of a library. So you can see I can open parts or I can go to my library. Really neat little piece of functionality to have the concept of being able to use a library. Another neat little component there that we're bringing over is just makes things a little less work is mesh shell. So if I come over to this mesh object, activate it, mesh utilities and shell. So yes, I could have shelled something in voxels and then made it a mesh, or convert it over, shell it, come back in, and it just multiple steps, but this is allowing you to shell right off of meshes. So that's very nice piece of functionality there. And finally, the last one, there's lots of other enhancements, by the way. These are just ones that I'm highlighting that I just like to point out, is the axis marker enhancements. So we now allow you to snap axis markers to a plane. So if I turn on this sketch plane, come over to axis marker, select plane, and then that'll allow me to click on the plane and create axis markers wherever I want to here. Really nice piece of functionality. And they're going to follow the normal of the plane, by the way. So like if I was concerned, I can just edit the plane and flip it over to the other side. So you can also use axis markers as a patterning tool. So this is another piece of functionality that's existed for a long time, but I just want to highlight it here since we were already talking about axis markers, right? So if I just grab and place some axis markers around this surface of this object. So now that I have all those axis markers, I can come over to pattern piece here. And the first step is selecting what I want to pattern. So I brought in this other piece. Let's just say that this is a bolt hole or something that I need. And then I can switch over to multi-curve. So I can select a bunch of curves. And in that instance, I'm going to use these axis markers. So you see, I'm going to select all those axis markers. I'm going to switch it to the second option here. I'm going to switch it to just one instance of the object, and you can kind of see where I'm going here. And then I can select tangent and then Y. So what I did here is this piece is aligned to the world coordinate system with the Y axis. So I'm telling it to use the piece and put it on the path tangent to the surface and slap the y-axis to that, right? So now you see that wherever I put an axis marker, it's going to place an instance of that object on the surface. And then at the end, you have the ability to say, I want to apply this as individual pieces, one merged piece. You know, you have a bunch of different, or I can cut it away from the object as well. In this instance, let's just go ahead and make it one piece that's separate, or I can merge it here. There's a bunch of different ideas. Individual pieces, make all of the cylinders one object. Boolean this with that, subtract it away, or all the options here. So tool has been here for a long time, but I just pointed out because it's one of these things that people will overlook and forget about. And since we talked about axis markers, I like to show workflows and how they tie in with each other. So as you can see here, we get out of the tool, it made a separate piece patterned across those. So there's one more feature in that pattern piece that we can show, and we go back in there to pattern piece without, so I'm just going to select an object. If I come over, select this piece, and instead of using the multi-curve, I'll use an object and select the piece that I'm working with. And then we will orient how many that we want to cover the surface of that part. And then change it to this. And then change it to tangent. So you can kind of see the process that we go through here. And this is just saying I'm going to add a bunch of these and make them tangent to the surface. I'm going to take the coordinate system of this part and make that tangent to the surface. We'll just see how many we can do. Just crank it to 11, right? Why not? And then I will go ahead and say, hey, let's merge that all into one. There we go. Manual or pattern piece, not manual pattern piece, but pattern piece has a ton of functionality in here and a lot of tricks in there. And it can take a little bit of time to kind of wrap your brain around getting it to work the way you want it to work, but it's really amazing. And I figured I would just show how the axis marker and how you can add it to planes, and then how you can use that alongside of this pattern piece, which is one of my favorite tools there. And yeah, so this has been some of my favorite tools in Freeform 2025. I hope I didn't bore you. I hope this was helpful for you, and good luck using Freeform, and look for more enhancements to come out as we're already working on the next release. Thanks a lot.